What's up, y'all? You got Dan from Musky Fool here for part 2 Musky fly casting, talking about the two-hand cast. Is it cheating? Is this real fly fishing? I don't know, but all I know is this. This is the only way I'm gonna be able to fly fish for muskies until I'm 90. So today we're gonna talk about two-hand casts. We're gonna run through what it's about, why we do it, some tips. But overall, this is just about efficiency. We preach it, we preach it, we preach it. We wanna reduce fatigue. We wanna cast farther, make less casts, but make them go farther and ultimately use some of these big, huge flies. So all of those things is why we two-hand cast. It does make it a little bit easier to deliver this stuff. So why do we do it? Why do we two-hand cast? Is it to look cool? Is it because we want to be like those cool spay guys? No, this is about 3 things. Delivering a huge payload, a huge fly. We just keep making these flies bigger and bigger and the two-hand cast can keep up. It's about reducing fatigue, reducing stress on your body, efficiency. When I'm two-hand casting, I'm barely moving. My hands are doing a little bit of the work. My forearms are doing a little bit of the work, but mostly the rod. And lastly, this is just about keeping you in the game, making that fly go longer. I can cover more water, bigger casts, fight the wind when we're in windy situations. So a lot of those variables we're gonna encounter musky fishing, the two-hand cast helps you power through. All right, quickly, let's run through a little bit of the gear. This is where I think it gets a little bit more specific. You gotta be a little bit careful with your rod and line choice to make sure they're well suited for two-handing. Similar principles to what old Bam Bam talked about in the previous video. We're usually overloading these rods with heavy lines, but what kind of rods are we using? Most of the musky fly rods that we use, talk about, sell, and can single-hand double haul also can two-hand cast, especially the ones that have the long foregrips and that big butt section. You're gonna need that big butt section for two-hand casting. So most of those work. As you get into the bigger rods, we got the Tommy Chippewa River Beast 9'10" rod here. This is 800 grain fly line on it. We got a Loomis 12 weight in the boat. We start to get specific two-hand only, especially on the Beast. And with some of those big flies. As far as fly lines go, this is probably the area where we are in most need of some good gear, but help is on the way. I got a sample 800 grain here of something new that's gonna be coming out soon. 600 grain on some of those 12 weights helps with the two-hand, 700 grain on some of the bigger rods, and then when you get to the top, some of the big stuff, 800 grains. Still musky lines, still want that shooting head. That's really all to it on the gear front. Make sure you got a two-handed rod that can handle that big payload. Another piece about gear, we talk about big flies, but sometimes it might not even be a big fly, it might just be a heavily weighted fly, something with an egg sinker. Oh my God, egg sinker. That helps get you down in deep water. Maybe you got a really heavy topwater fly. So just anytime there's weight and you feel like you've hit the pinnacle on your double haul and it's really because of that fly, that's when the two-hand cast comes into the equation. Me personally, I actually started doing it because I got injured. It was making it really tough to single-hand double haul with my right arm. It was hurting. And the two-hand was the only way I could fish. It takes all the pressure off, mainly the left hand. And I've been doing it ever since. I love two-hand and you can sling it really far with very few false casts. So let's get into a little bit of that, how we do it. All right, we're gonna run through a couple, basically the art of the two-hand cast. So it all starts with the grip. Theoretically, we're gonna be coming out of our figure 8 and we're already in this grip setup, but just to go over it, we're gonna run the line up here on our dominant hand. It's gonna go through my hand. I go through all my fingers, and then it's gonna come back here along the shaft of the rod, above the reel, and I'm gonna grip that with my left hand, right here. These are gonna be my brake pedals. When I'm shooting line out, I'm gonna let go and let some slide through my hands, and when I'm really gripping down, that's when I'm gonna generate some of that power so that it shoots out afterwards. So that's the grip setup. Number 2, you really wanna organize your fly line. You're gonna be clearing a lot of fly lines, 60, 70, 80, 90 feet or more in just a few casts. It's gonna happen with a lot of line speed. If there's anything to get caught on, any tangles, it's gonna happen and it's just gonna bring it to an abrupt stop. So make sure you clear your fly line. Even if you have to get it out there a couple times, get some line out, get it nice in a nice pile. We got the launch pad down there. We're big fans of the launch pad, especially when we're two-hand casting in the big boats. Make sure your fly line's organized and ready to go. Number 3, really, when you got that grip set up, your fly line set up, we've just finished an 8. The two-hand cast is really, it starts with that transition. It's just like the double haul. I'm gonna make a sweep to the back and shoot some line out. Show you that one more time. Finish my figure 8, get my grip, sweep, get some fly line out. I'm stopping and letting it fall to the water, and normally I wouldn't do that, but that's a good picture of that first initial transition is huge. If I don't do that right, I'm gonna be stuck with very little fly line out, and I'm gonna have to false cast a couple more times. So always important to get that sweep, get about 15, 20 feet. It actually is easier to do with these heavy flies because I can sweep it and let the fly kind of take some line out, and then I'm in the game and I'm ready to go. All right, couple other pieces to the puzzle of the two-hand. So we got the sweep down. That's really gonna help us minimize. When I'm two-hand casting, I wanna minimize those false casts. I wanna go back once, forwards once, back again, and down. At most, sometimes when you're doing it well, you can go back and put it down and get 60 feet out. And that's really ideal because then you only have one false cast. The second piece, you really want to pay attention to not casting too much of your fly line out in your false cast. I got this shooting head and it shows me right here the transition. If I start to see some of that yellow line out while I'm casting, it's gonna get harder, the line's gonna start to collapse, I'm not gonna be able to generate as much power. So I wanna make sure I'm only false casting really to the end of my shooting head, and when I get to that point, I'm letting it fly and it's ripping all that running line off the ground. Next piece, I'm right-handed. But when I two-hand cast, the thing that's really gonna generate the power, take the burden off, and give me that proper form is gonna be feeling the cast with my left hand right down here, especially when you go to make that punch, you go to make that power move. So I can almost, if I took my right hand off, the fly line would go everywhere, but I'm really moving my left hand, moving that rod, generating that power. My right hand is simply a guide, moving that left hand, pushing it, pulling it. And that's how we get the power with these big heavy rods, big heavy flies. All right, another little tip, the arc of our two-hand cast. We're not doing any of the fancy snap tees and laying line down, and we're really keeping it simple. It's a simple cast, back and forth. But the arc of our cast, or the angle, can change. And I think when I'm two-hand casting, especially when wind's in the equation, I'm keeping that rod low. I'm kind of going with a Belgian style, off to the side here, and maybe come a little bit over the top when I make that final delivery. But I'm keeping it low, stays out of the wind, plus keeps it away from my body. We're casting huge flies with treble hooks in them. I don't want that thing to be singing past my ears. In general, you'll see it right here. That's kind of the arc that I'm gonna keep this at. When I come to make one over the top, I might bring a little bit more energy over the top on that final cast, but otherwise keeping it low, keeping it right along the surface. That actually helps me quite a bit kind of feel that fly line. Last little piece of the puzzle for the cast, and then we'll see if we can get some examples, is really to adjust your cadence to the rod and the setup. When we're two-hand casting some of these smaller setups, the 11 weights, 12 weights, Loomises, Echo Muskies, Sage Payloads, Chippewa Rivers, you name it, some of the smaller 10, 11, 12s, you do have to be a little quicker. You do have to be quicker to generate that power and keep the right, loop in your fly line. Similarly, when I'm two-hand casting smaller flies with some of those smaller rods, I can get away with and prefer a tighter loop, just like if I was double hauling. As we get to some of the bigger rods, the bigger flies, that's when we open up the loop with our two-hand cast. So it'd be the same, I can throw tight loops a little bit quicker, and then when I get the bigger stuff, I'm gonna open that up and be a little bit lazier, adjust that cadence and find that right rhythm. So those are, a rundown of some of the basic principles that go into two-hand casts. A little different than the double haul. There's a lot of double haul information out there. We obviously did part 1, which we hope you liked, but the two-hand cast is different. There's not a lot of info out there. It's relatively new. I do firmly believe that this is gonna be kind of the future, at least for my musky fly fishing, because it just keeps me in the game. A little bit of tips, two-hand cast. All right. So we're going to talk about a few other little styles to this two-hand cast. We are going to talk a little bit about water loading. Oh, water loading. I think that's where this gets a bad rap. Is it cheating? So no, I don't think it's cheating. I'm fly casting, I really believe it. I'm using the same principles and the same technique I use when I'm single hand casting, but there are some exceptions. We really get into a certain situation, heavy wind in your face. There's various different things that'll cause it that do lead me to maybe opt to water load a little bit. Maybe if I'm backhand double or two-hand casting, I'll water load a little bit. But overall, I think in general, there's a specific way I do it when nothing else is in the way. And then I may have to adjust some of those. Those techniques might change a little bit. I might have to combine them together. You know, if I want to make a cast back that way, or Josh tells me he moved a fish on the other side of the boat and I want to quickly fire one that way. Those things present times where you're gonna, just have to kind of remain flexible. If your fly is already out there, maybe you water load it out and the next one you're two-handing. I'm all about just getting it out there as easy as possible. That's why I love the two-hand cast. So let's go through a couple different ways that this can go. I typically will come into an 8, sweep my fly line back, and start casting from there, like that. We'll do that one more time, full speed. Come into the 8, sweep my fly line back, and start casting from there. Just like that. All aerialized, couple false casts. Another method, which is really effective, this is, I guess, the true water load for me, is when I go to make that sweep back, I'm actually going to keep the fly, let it kind of hit the water, get some tension, and then hit my power stroke from there. I'll show you what that kind of looks like. Sweep back, let it hit, and send it. You do got to be careful, especially with your fly line at your feet, so that you clear it. And you really want to make sure that you don't let that fly hang in the water when you're water loading too long. Otherwise, you will hurt yourself. And it'll feel like you're pulling a brick up from the bottom. So again, back, let it fall, and give it a power stroke. That does help. I'll do that once in a while. I'll be honest, that's when it doesn't start to feel like fly fishing anymore. And personally, I just don't cast as effectively that way. Much more accurate, have much more distance with less fatigue when I keep that fly line aerialized. You don't feel as much pressure. The other thing we're gonna show a little bit here is how to backhand with the two-hand rod. There's a lot of different styles that I kind of come across on this. Really, it's the same setup as the forward cast. I'm just gonna make my two-hand sweeps, and my last one is gonna be a kind of power stroke. Again, still using that left hand to drive the bus. So I'm coming across my body here, across my body, use that left hand to make the power stroke and shoot it out there. I don't really suffer a distance drop, backhand or forehand. This thing has got a lot of power, and when you load it up right, it shoots line out there perfectly. That's our two-hand casting video, folks. That's how I like to fish. It's really effective. I think you're gonna find it to be effective. I think you're gonna find it to be really enjoyable. If you don't, call it cheating. You can always watch Bam Bam's video on actual fly casting for muskies on your double haul. That's it, the two-hand cast. Hope you liked it. We'll see you next time, folks.